Oh my gosh. Look at how just like crazy the garden is. I don't know if you guys can see it behind me, but it's like, it is nutty. The garden has just exploded. We just harvested a bunch of potatoes today. First potato harvest of the year, so I can give you guys a little bit of a tour, because yeah, like later, because the garden is just like a little bit crazy. Let me zoom out just a little bit. There we go. I felt like my head was like being cut off here. This is also like the most clothes that I have worn in a while. We've been getting some really hot weather here. Maui's just looking that way. You looking at neighbors, buddy? I just heard my neighbor's dog, so my neighbors are probably just out and about. Anyway, I struggle making videos every week in the summer because my work schedule is kind of nutty in the summer. This was the same problem last year. I ended up stopping making videos. Like, I didn't make a single video at all last summer. Like, I stopped for like a good 2 months because I was just, there was a lot of factors. My work schedule was messed up, but we also had continuous guests. I didn't have access to my computer, and on and on and on. So this year I've been trying to like upload videos consistently. Next year will be even better though, because I shouldn't be working during the summer next year because I got a new job. So that'll be nice. Anyway, I don't think I did a video on this particular topic, but I wanted to talk about sort of like what they don't tell you about homesteading. Hi, buddy. What? So, before I moved here, you know, I was watching a lot of like homesteading videos, a lot of tiny living videos on YouTube, and really just like you're really just shown like the best parts of it. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but you know, just like with my tiny wood stove video, I kind of wanted to just do a little video sort of showcasing the pros and cons. Homesteading is really expensive, and I once heard Sean James mention something like this as well. It is not cheap. And especially if you, and just like tiny living, it kind of just depends on how you do it. But if you want a homestead and also have the daily amenities like you sort of kind of wanted, similar to living in the city, such as electricity and water, that may be a challenge for you. So we just finished bringing both electricity and water onto our back half of the property. That's where my parents' new house got delivered, and also where my tiny house is. We have a main house on the property. That's where my parents live now. That house has water and electricity already, but the other half of our property, because we have 20 acres, right? So the other half of our property didn't have anything, no electricity, like no water. So this year we brought electricity to the back half of the property, so my tiny house has electricity, and we just finished digging the well. And holy cow, that was not cheap. To bring electricity in here, we needed to install 3 power poles from the power company. And because there was electricity sort of down the road, like my neighbors had electricity, but we needed to bring it up to our property, which required us to install 3 power poles. And it cost $10,000 per power pole. So we had to pay the electricity company $30,000. Then there's more actually to the cost of installing electricity, such as we had to build, you have to build a sort of like power shed, right? We chose not to build a power shed, and we instead chose to build a garage. So that was another $40,000. Now, we did not have to make that choice in order to bring electricity in here. We definitely could have chosen to just build a shed rather than a full garage. But anyway, so that was kind of just an expense, but it was like a more luxurious expense. Otherwise, $30,000 is what we had to pay to bring electricity here. Then when we got our first power bill, and the power companies here don't bill you every month. It's weird. They will bill you like every 3 months, which is kind of ridiculous in my opinion, but anyway, whatever. There is no other options for power companies here. You have the one power company, so they have the monopoly, they can just do whatever they want. So anyway, so we got our first power bill 2 months in, like 2 months after we have had power. And the power bill itself wasn't all that expensive because it was only me using electricity in the tiny house, and the tiny house like has like almost no electricity. I do not use my electric heat if I need to heat, which it's summertime right now, so I'm not heating my house, but if I do feel chilly and need to heat my house, more so in the off seasons, right, I heat with wood. So the first electricity bill, it was $50 for the electricity, which is fine. But they also charged us a $700 hookup fee. What? This is on top of the $30,000 we'd already given them, so there was that. We drilled for water, we found water, and that cost us, I said in my last video, how much did I say? 47,000? 46,000? We found water at 465 feet, and it was $100 a foot. So, there you go. So, and that was just drilling the well. The well is drilled, but then once you have your well drilled and your sleeve in, then you need to call a plumber. Then the plumber needs to come, and they have to because now that you have the hole in the ground, like we have the hole in the ground, but there's no way to get the water up, up and out. So we need a pump. And we haven't gotten that installed yet, so we don't have the final bill for that cost, right? But the first guy we went with, like the first plumber, quoted us $18,000, and my parents were like, no, let's get another opinion. So they did. So again, we don't have the final bill from this guy because work hasn't even started on the pump, but it'll probably be around $7,000 to $9,000 with like my parents and me doing a lot of the work ourselves with the plumber as like a guide basically. So there is that. And then of course we have to trench in like water and power to my parents' new house that just got delivered. And I did a house tour of their new house. It's really cute. It's a manufactured home. I can link it up here. Anyway, so those are just the expenses that we had this year. Now, there's a lot of ways to save money while homesteading, and if you're willing to live off-grid and this and that, then that's definitely one way to do it. But you may not be able to live off-grid forever. Like for us, my parents are getting a little older now. They're in their 50s, right? In another 10, 15, 20 years, they're not going to be able to do a lot of this really, really, really hard work that we're doing on the homestead now. So, for us, living off-grid wasn't necessarily an option. I still heat with wood. I will always heat with wood even though I have electricity, but as my parents get older and as my parents age, we need those backup systems. They need to be able to heat their home with a furnace if they get, to the point where they can no longer keep their wood stove lit, and et cetera, right? So if you want a lot of those amenities on your homestead, that can be really expensive. In the city, you don't have to pay to have the actual infrastructure built because it's already built already. Your power lines are already there, your water lines are already there. But if you live rurally and you want those amenities and they're not already on your property, then it can be pretty expensive to bring them here. Another thing that is really expensive in terms of homesteading is buying and maintaining all of your equipment, right? Hi, buddy. Like for me, that's the chainsaws. We own multiple chainsaws, and we have to maintain that equipment. and et cetera, right? Same with like, we just bought a sawmill. Oh my gosh, there's been so much. So, you know, you have to pay to like maintain all of this equipment. If you live off grid and if you have solar, right? You got to maintain all of that equipment. That can definitely be really expensive. One common misconception I think about homesteading is that many people do need to keep their day jobs. I am one of those people. You know, the YouTube homesteaders will really have you believe that you can just, you know, quit your job, start homesteading, and then just like make jam all day, right? And that may be possible, but not likely. Everyone that I know out here works, and in fact, you will most likely work more. Now, will you work more at your day job when you own a homestead? That kind of just, it just depends. It depends on, you know, how much you're able to save money in other areas. So for me, a big part that I save money in is my heat for my tiny house. I heat with wood. I source all the wood myself. I mean, we source the wood off of this land. A tree just fell the other day right next to my tiny house, so that was nice. So I'm going to be cutting that up for firewood, etc., right? So I'm able to work a little bit less at my day job because I'm able to save money in these kind of areas. Another thing we do as a family is we, you know, try and grow more of our own food. I wouldn't say that we are growing a lot of our own food, but we are working on it. Like it is a process, and this is the largest this garden has ever been, and it's only going to get larger and larger, right? We also have chickens, so the price of eggs does not affect us, thank goodness, because holy cow, like right now in my area, the cheap eggs, like the cheapest of the cheap eggs, those are going for like $6 a dozen. That is ridiculous. However, we are affected by the cost of feed for our chickens. But you can also subsidize, you know, your chickens by feeding them, you know, garden scraps and blah, blah, blah. So you will most likely have to keep a day job of some sort, right? And when you live rurally, finding a really sort of decent day job can be really, really difficult. A lot of the work here is, you know, seasonal, part-time, you know, not always, doesn't always pay well unless you want to commute all the way to the cities, and some people do, right? So you'll most likely be working your day job or a day job of some kind when you work out here. Another thing that I tell a lot of people, or I tell a lot of folks, is that I work so much more out here than I ever did in the city, right? We are building gardens. This year I have to build a garden shed still. I haven't even started on that. I'm sourcing my own firewood, like, you know, on top of my day job. I'm, you know, recording for YouTube. That's just like a fun thing, right? But we do garden, like we work so much more than I ever did in the city. Now, with that being said, it is pretty rewarding. Like, I sort of equate the work, especially with the firewood, I kind of equate it to like going to the gym. So instead of going to the gym for whatever 3, 4, 5 days a week, I just work on my firewood an hour every day. And then there you go, right? So if you're going to get a homestead, you're definitely going to be working more, and the work is extremely seasonal, right? In the wintertime, that's when you rest, right? In the summertime, especially when stuff's coming out of the garden, like my parents have made jam like there's no tomorrow. They've made strawberry jam, they've made strawberry rhubarb jam, they have made apricot jam, they have made blueberry jam. They've just been making jam like crazy. You know, and as more stuff comes comes out of the garden, right, we have to like store it, and on and on and on. So you're definitely going to be working more on top of a day job. Now, I don't necessarily mind this, but you know. One thing that I really also did want to mention, because it affects me a lot, well, not just me, of course, but everyone, is that if you live in a rural area, this isn't having much to do with homesteading in particular. I guess it does and it doesn't. But there's a severe lack of healthcare in rural areas, really all across Canada, but especially in BC. Right here, like right now, the closest hospital to me is over an hour away. So if I injure myself on the homestead, like maybe I slice my leg with my chainsaw, like God forbid, right? But if that happens and I seriously injure myself, the closest hospital is over an hour away. Now, thank goodness here in Canada, at least for now, I'm not going to get into the politics about it, but for now we still have public health care in Canada, thank goodness. So, you know, they are really good about if they transport you to a hospital close by and you need more serious care, they will airlift you into, you know, into another hospital that may be several hours away, right? And thank goodness we do have, you know, like universal health care for that. But a family doctor in this area is out of the question. I've been on the waiting list for a family doctor for well over a year. And I mean, they say that the waiting list is only 1 year long, but a lot of the more locals that I know have been on the waiting list for 5+ years. And so getting a family doctor is, I know it's difficult everywhere across Canada right now, but especially if you live in a rural area, like, it is impossible. Basically, for many folks out here, myself included, there is no walk-in clinics either, by the way. There is 0 walk-in clinics. My healthcare is the emergency department. So if I have, you know, like when I was having issues with my vertigo, I didn't want to go to Emerge because I didn't want to take those spots away from, you know, someone who really, really, really needed it. But every time I wanted to see a doctor, even if it was just over the telephone, I would have to wait 6 to 8 weeks. I would have to book 6 to 8 weeks in advance, which is a little bit crazy. So, you know, when we're homesteading, I would highly recommend homesteading with somebody, family, friends, whatever. That way, if you injure yourself, you at least have another person there to, you know, perform first aid or whatever. Would highly recommend having a basic first aid and CPR course as well. Of course, when you homestead, you may be more self-sufficient. I say may, right? Because there's a lot of factors. I'm not going to really go into detail about it in this video because I kind of want to make a whole other video about it, but we don't have solar here. Solar does not work for us. Everyone and their mother and every homesteader you've ever watched has been like, solar is the best thing and you need to get solar. No. Not because I don't think it's a good idea. We will probably get a panel or two eventually, but we will never be able to support the entire property on solar, largely because of the location that we are at. We just don't get enough sun for it. I know because my neighbor, she has solar and she's like, don't even bother. Don't even bother. You know, you may become more self-sufficient when you are homesteading. Again, it just kind of depends on how you do it, etc., etc. Now, this is something that was really, really interesting to me when I moved out here. And I've spoken to a lot of other people who've also moved here, and they have said the same thing, in that you may care about the environment a lot more. It isn't that I didn't care about the environment when I lived in the city, but it's just when you live in the city and you're just surrounded by concrete, and, you know, you don't have an opportunity to get out into nature, it's very difficult to see with your own 2 eyes the effects of climate change and global warming. But here, I mean, many parts of British Columbia, even in major cities, you basically just play disaster roulette, like every season. You know, wildfire season, it's like which town is going to burn down, which city is going to burn down, right? In the springs, it's landslide roulette. It's like whose property is going to get devastated by floods or landslides, right? So you see climate change a lot more out here, and you're affected by it way more than you ever were in the city. And so I am incredibly passionate about the environment, not only because I can see it with my own two eyes, but also if the resources that I need to survive are taken away, like, I'm going to have a more difficult time surviving, right? It's no accident that many Indigenous communities in Canada don't have access to the resources that they need to survive. You know, if a company were to come down and chop down, all of the forest on all of the mountainsides around my house, then many of us will not be able to heat our homes. Many of us can't afford electric heat, which is the only other option out here, because it's expensive. So, we're really passionate about defending that, right? Our water, we have two sources of water currently on the homestead. We have a well, and one of the reasons we dug the well is because our well is very, 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 very deep. Like, it's 400 and something feet, right? The good thing about having a deep well is that it may be difficult. Okay, sorry, Maui's like looking and it's starting to get like kind of twilighty now. So I'm more aware about bears, but Maui he's just chilling behind the camera. And so he'll just occasionally like look into the forest, but he's not alerting me to anything. So we're fine. Anyway, so our well is very deep, and it probably like won't get contaminated by anything, but like, let's say if a company took up fracking in my area, right, then there goes my well. Same with our other source of water, which comes from a spring, right? If a company has a massive oil spill, which actually happened in my area just before we bought this property, there was a huge oil spill right down from my house. And, so if companies are coming in wanting to like devastate the land, not just around my house, but also, for my neighbors, for Indigenous folks, for folks in other communities, like, people need these natural resources to survive, right? And if corporations are going to come in and, like, devastate the land, then like we cannot survive. I'm incredibly lucky to live in an area that is rich in, natural resources, like, for example, wood to heat my home, fresh, clean water, to, not only have drinking water, but also to make sure that we can irrigate our gardens and, grow food and et cetera, right? But if these natural resources are not here, it will be incredibly difficult for us to be self-sufficient. In order for us to be self-sufficient, we need a healthy environment, and if our environment isn't healthy, then we cannot survive, and then we are reliant, we are much more reliant on like companies and corporations. And the last point I wanted to talk about is kind of a double-edged sword, because it kind of just depends. I see on the internet, especially on TikTok, where like, homesteading influencers will, be like, oh, your mental health will improve so much. Yes and no. The issue with mental health, and I can do a whole other video on this as well, because I think that would be an incredibly fascinating video. But the challenge with mental health when you live rurally is getting access to mental health supports is much more difficult in a rural area. The more rural you are, the less access you have to mental health supports. I know that addiction is really everywhere. In cities and rural areas it doesn't really matter, but I really, really, really notice addiction out here a lot more because it's much more prevalent. It's like much more in your face. Because I know these people, right? In the city, it's easier to dismiss someone who would maybe be struggling with addiction because you may not know them like personally, right? But out here, the community is much smaller, and these folks are my neighbors. I know them, I love them, I support them, and so I think moving out here didn't just magically cure my depression, right? And in fact, the first year that I was out here, so it will be 2 years that I've lived out here in September, and I would say that my mental health has only really started improving like drastically within the last probably 3 or 4 months. I am much more healthy now than I was when I first moved here. Hi, buddy. Maui. Hi. Yeah, I know. So just simply moving to a rural area isn't going to just magically fix your depression, but for me, it's easier to spend time in nature. It's easier to spend time in the sun. It's easier out here to do the things that I need to be doing for my mental health. There is no food delivery service here. There's no DoorDash. There's no, like whatever, right? I can't just call a pizza place if I'm feeling lazy and don't want to cook dinner. Like, I have to cook here. So being out here kind of forces me to take care of myself better. But I mean, I know plenty of people around here who struggle with depression or who are just miserable. And, I think living in a place like this has, like I said, made it easier to do those things that I need to be doing for my mental health. But living out here didn't just magically, cure my depression. Anyway, it's getting pretty dark here. I know my camera's really, really, really good in like low light, but it's a little too dark to see the garden or anything like that. So I'll probably do another garden tour with my mom, maybe for next week's video. And then, so let me know what you folks want to hear more about. There was some talking points that I did today that I can absolutely expand on and elaborate on. I noticed that a lot of folks are still continuing to watch my firewood and wood stove videos. So I want to do another video on seasoning firewood, because I have been, obviously seasoning firewood sort of this whole time, and chainsawing and chopping firewood, as you probably know, is just a part of my life. I do it almost every day. And, but I just bought a moisture meter, and I think I can speak a little bit more on, how to season firewood, how long it takes to season firewood, especially softwoods, right? Because that's what we mostly have around here. So anyway, let me know if you want me to talk more on those things, or if there's any other videos that you folks really want to see more of. I am, I can't really say how many videos I will be posting for the rest of this summer, but I know that once I get into back into fall time, that's when I'll start uploading every single week again. It's just, summertime is just always a struggle. I'm working way too much at my day job, and then of course we have guests often. We've actually been guest free for a couple of weeks. My cousin and my uncle went home a few weeks ago, so I think we've had 2 or 3 weeks to ourselves this year, which was nice, because last summer, basically, my uncle and my cousin came and they stayed for 2 weeks, and then it was my mom's best friend, and they came and stayed for 2 weeks, and then they left, and literally the same day that they left, my mom's other friend came and stayed for a week. So it was last year, it was just kind of constant guests, which is, like I said before, it's nice, it's great. I love having guests, and I love chatting with and spending time with the people in my life who are important, but also it can get a lot, especially when you have work around the homestead that you need to do, and et cetera, et cetera. So, so anyway, let me know, and we will see you later. Maui, are you ready for bed, buddy? You ready for bed? I know, me too.